Welcome to this NFHS Rule Change presentation for the 2023-2024 NFHS wrestling season. This presentation will cover the changes to the rules regarding inbounds and out of bounds. All interpretations and decisions discussed in this presentation are in accordance with the latest available rule documents and interpretations given by official NFHS records. These rules and interpretations should be strictly followed by all stakeholders throughout the 2023-2024 NFHS wrestling season. Let's start by reviewing the portions of the inbounds rules that have not changed. In recent seasons, this rule has seen the most widespread changes, resulting in some of the largest overall changes to how the sport is wrestled and officiated at the high school level. Still in effect for the 2023-2024 season, a total of 2 supporting points of either wrestler is needed on the mat, inside or on the boundary lines for wrestling to be considered inbounds. The diagram shown gives 6 examples, 5 of which are inbounds with various configurations. In all of the inbound situations, a minimum of 2 supporting points are met by having the feet within or in contact with the boundary line. Remember, the total of 2 can come from either one wrestler or 1 point supporting from each wrestler. The only example shown that defines as out of bounds is figure 4, in which the blue wrestler is the only one with a single supporting point in bounds. In this situation, wrestling must be ruled out of bounds. In addition, we must examine figure 5 as it gives us the interpretation that contact with the line is enough to be considered on the line and in bounds. A supporting point must be completely beyond the boundary line to be considered out of bounds. Another recent rulebook change that remains the same this year is that supporting points need no longer be the actual part of the body supporting the wrestler's weight. Supporting points by rule may or may not bear the wrestler's weight. Thus, any part of the body, including the knees, buttocks, side of thigh, hands, or head, while in contact with the mat, can be considered a supporting point and may go towards the total of 2 needed. This image is a good example of an inbound scenario where the actual parts of the body supporting the weight of the wrestlers are completely out of bounds. Yet the hands of the defensive wrestler gives the situation its total of 2. Years ago, this would have been out of bounds. With the recent rule changes in the past 5 years, this is inbounds with continued wrestling. Also still the same with regards to inbounds and supporting points is that the pinning situations, the defensive wrestler's supporting points become the pinning area. The feet, hips, butt, head, and elbows all become ignored. The shoulders and scapula become the only thing a referee can consider as the defensive wrestler's supporting points. In the image above, the foot of the defensive wrestler and its position inbounds is irrelevant. Only the pinning area matters, and any portion of that pinning area on the mat inbounds makes the whole situation inbounds. This next image, provided directly by NFHS, goes even further to show that only a portion of the pinning area need be in bounds to allow wrestling to continue. It does, however, require that portion to be on and not over the mat. This final image amplifies that while the pinning area is on the mat, no other points may be considered. Although it looks like there are at least 2 supporting points in bounds of the red wrestler in both images, that wrestler is on his back and those points cannot be considered. Both of these examples are out of bounds and the match must be stopped. The last portion of the inbounds rule to remain unchanged is the handling of the offensive wrestler in pinning situations. When rules were first changed to the total of 2, but feet were not supporting points down on the mat, An exception was made to allow the offensive wrestler to bring his knees up so as long as they remain over the inbound area. This became high school's only acknowledgement of a body part that wasn't in contact with the mat when considering inbounds decisions. The images provided show a clear distinction of inbounds versus out of bounds when considering the knees of the offensive wrestler in a pinning situation. Now that we've reviewed what has not changed about inbounds rulings, let's discuss what has changed. Beginning with the current 2023-2024 season, supporting points down on the mat have expanded by one category. When down on the mat, the usual supporting points are the knees, the side of the thigh, the buttocks, the hands, the head, and newly added, the foot or feet. Prior to this season, the feet of any wrestler down on the mat could not be considered a supporting point unless they were an offensive wrestler in a pinning situation. Feet can now be considered supporting points in any position, except for the defensive wrestler on their back. However, this rule was not amended to expand the wrestling area, simply to alleviate confusion between pinning and non-pinning situations. Interpretations have been added as well through the casebook and press release to instruct us how the NFHS interprets this rule. Let's take a look at some examples and align them to the rules and interpretations so that the calls made are correct and understood in this new season. This situation is inbounds. This was inbounds under the previous rule set. The knees and feet of the controlling wrestler are clearly inbounds. If this was the finish to a takedown or reversal, the points would be scored and wrestling would continue. This situation is now inbounds. This may have been out of bounds last year. It is unclear from this angle how many total points the defending wrestler has down on the mat inbounds. The left side of thigh of the defending wrestler is in contact with the line and inbounds. The right foot of the attacking wrestler can now be considered and is clearly inbounds. Under the new rule set, this situation is inbounds regardless of the unseen portion of the defending wrestler. This situation is inbounds. This was out of bounds last year, as the only supporting point would be the right knee. This is inbounds this year, as we can consider both the right knee and the right foot. Even when the left knee comes down, this is still inbounds if the right knee and foot remain down on the mat inbounds. A point of contention with this is whether or not we are allowed to consider the knee and the foot from the same leg. This will be clarified further later in this presentation. This situation is inbounds. This was out of bounds last year. The feet could not be considered when down on the mat. This is inbounds, and wrestling can continue if the knees of the attacking wrestler remain on or over the inbounds area. This is a piece of additional information not found in the rulebook, but is clearly defined in the casebook for the 2023-2024 season under NFHS cases 518-2 and 525-1A. This situation is out of bounds. This was out of bounds last year and is still out of bounds. Although feet may now be considered as the supporting points, the knees of the scoring wrestler being beyond the boundary make this case out of bounds. Again, this interpretation is not found in the rule, but specifically in the casebook under NFHS case 525-1A. However, the definitions of takedowns and reversals remain as they did in previous seasons, even though this match must be stopped with no further wrestling taking place. Should a takedown or reversal attempt finish here, the maneuver should be scored, with the attacking wrestler awarded 2 points and restarting the match in the offensive position. Let's now go into more detail with the two situations that require more than is written in the rulebook. Let's start with the two supporting points from the same limb scenario. Again, this is in bounds. It is not explicitly stated in the rule that 2 points from the same limb cannot be considered. In late September of 2023, an official release was sent out to all interscholastic associations regarding this question, with the quote from Elliot Hopkins, NFHS Director of Sport, being the following: "The confirmed official interpretation is that 2 supporting points can be on one leg. Example, left foot and left knee of the same leg of the wrestler would constitute 2 supporting points on the mat." To minimize ambiguity, we also want to consider what this might look like in a near-fall scenario. This interpretation does not change because the situation goes to a pinning situation. This is in bounds. So long as the knee and the foot of the offensive wrestler remain the 2 supporting points on the mat, this match can continue. A final reminder that no other point can be considered for the defensive wrestler other than their pinning area. In this image, the hand and/or elbow being on or over the boundary line has no bearing on whether this is in bounds or not. Returning to our example where 2 feet are in and we are still out of bounds, we must look into the casebook for answers on this interpretation. The rulebook does not explicitly state that this is out of bounds, but the casebook makes it quite clear. First, we look at the reasoning behind the rule change, which in the casebook reads: feet are regularly supporting the wrestler's weight during the match while on the mat. A wrestler's feet are allowed to be considered supporting points while in a near-fall situation. By adding it to the list of usual supporting points on the mat, it will create more clarity and consistency for the wrestlers, coaches, and officials. The first of 2 cases we want to look at is case 518-2, which reads: from the neutral position, wrestler A executes a takedown and establishes control with wrestler B out of bounds. Wrestler A's knees land A on the boundary line or B beyond the boundary line. Ruling: in A, wrestler A is considered in bounds because wrestler A's knees finished on the boundary line. Wrestling shall continue. In B, the wrestlers are considered out of bounds because all of the wrestlers' supporting points are beyond the boundary line. Comment: wrestler A would still be awarded the takedown if wrestler A's feet finished down on the mat in bounds. This first case clearly delineated that the knees out versus the knees being in still holds weight on whether or not the feet on or inside the boundary line is enough to have wrestling continue. The second case, case 525-1, goes into a bit more detail in enshrining the fact that this image would be out of bounds. It reads, may a wrestler's knees or hips land on the boundary line and still gain a takedown or reversal as long as the toes remain on the mat in bounds. Ruling, yes. If the scoring wrestler has control of the opponent and lands out of bounds with only the feet of the scoring wrestler in bounds, then a takedown shall be scored. The knees of the offensive wrestler are an important factor. If the knees are beyond the out of bounds line, the score may be earned, then ruled out of bounds. If the knees are in or over the line, the score is earned and wrestling may continue. It now becomes clear that although we may consider the feet to be supporting, when they are the only points of support remaining in bounds, the position of the knees relative to the boundary line will govern whether wrestling will continue or not. Please note, this situation can still be a takedown or reversal if control was gained. Wrestling simply is not allowed to continue here, regardless of the state or actions of the wrestlers. Thank you very much for joining us for this NFHS rules interpretation. We wish you all the best of luck with the 2023-2024 NFHS wrestling season.